take us back to the moment when you realized you became an Olympian.
I kind of knew leading up to that race, to like Olympic trials in Switzerland, that there's always a possibility, but I knew like I'm like close and I was in great shape, like because we just had ACC championships with UVA. I swam really fast there, and I traveled back home, and it was a 200 individual medley, and I just went for it in the morning, and had like a pretty good swim, but like you touched the wall, and I was so relaxed in a way. It was when you like lose the sense of time. You don't even know what's going on. You just like I remember like walking in, seeing my parents were like there, and there's like the crowd and all that, and it just kind of blanked out. And I jumped in the water. I felt like a penguin, like gliding. Like it was just like, and I knew I was off to a good start. And I don't remember much of the race, but then I touched the wall and looked back and checked the time. And it's one of these moments, when I didn't surprise just my coach and my parents, but actually surprised myself. Yeah. And these are the moments that as a swimmer, that's why we train 20, 30 hours a week. And so that moment I saw the time and I saw that I qualified for the Olympics, and I was like, I just went, like, because I was first in my country, and I was just like celebrating. I saw the smile on my parents' face. Like my mom was going nuts, These moments, like, oof, I could have many of those. I mean, if we could have one of those a day, that'd be great.
You said you were relaxed. This is the race of your life, of your career. You could have said the opposite. I was like so stressed and so much pressure, which, to be honest, you and I both know you would not have had the performance that you did. But how do you go into a high pressure moment, relax? And for the listener, they're not competitive athletes, right? They were athletic at some point, maybe in their life in high school or college, but like maybe their pressure moment is going into a meeting with their boss, a job interview, a sales presentation. How were you relaxed in your high pressure moment?
The truth is that I was less nervous when I was a 10-year-old swimmer. I was nervous then already. Like the truth is I suffered from severe, I would say, performance anxiety throughout my entire swimming career. And it got worse and worse and worse because the stakes get bigger, right? So it's the same in the job. It's like, well, you start out as an intern. Okay, am I going to get that intern job? And then all of a sudden you're MD. Am I going to get that MD position, or am I going to be voted into the executive board, right? The stakes get bigger. And I was more nervous as I got older and I got better. But I think at the same time, as the nervousness went up, my skills, like the psychological skills to handle that nervousness and deal with it, went up a lot more. Like the growth of that was faster. Sure. So it's not like that the nervousness went away, but my skills on how to handle that got a lot better. And then that's why I said like I felt relaxed compared to back in the days when I didn't have those skills, right? And it was just nervousness. And I was like, yeah, it never worked out. And then all of a sudden it started to work out. And again, it was like Dr. Jim Bauman, right? The sports psychologist that Phelps had. UVA hired him, and what a coincidence. And I was, I tell you what, right? When they hired him, I was one of the first, like there's only 2 guys on the swim team that raised their hand and said, yeah, I want to work with him. Isn't that crazy?
Yeah. Quick side note. My story. Like, I worked with a sports psychologist late in my college career at UVA, different sports psychologist, not Jim Bauman, of course. I worked with Dr. Tom Perrin. There were 2 guys on the team who he worked with. 2 guys raised their hands to work with him, and both of us were All-Americans.
See?
Figure.
And that is exactly, I went to the Olympics, and the other guy raised his hand. He became 7th in the 100 freestyle for America. So he just missed it because back in the days, they used to take 6 for the relay. Just missed it, but he's one of the best that we had at the time, right? Yeah, it's just crazy, that was, and the people was, like, are you mentally not tough enough? You got a problem? There's
right.
another thing on
your
plate.
It's a weakness, right? It's like coaching. It's like the like what I do. I'm an executive life coach. It's like, what do you need an executive life coach for? Like, what do you need that for? Like, you got a weakness. It's like, no, man, the people who I work with, they're high performers and they want to be even better. And that's what I wanted. I was doing pretty well. I was ranked top 15 in the country, but I wanted to be even better. I wanted to be top 8 in the country. And so did this other guy on my team, Matt Roth. And, so those are the guys who are raising their hand and saying, give me more.
Right. When we can just say, well, yeah, I do struggle with this and I want to get better. Sweet spot.
So you got to work with Jim Bauman, who was the mindset coach for Michael Phelps. What was that experience like?
Oh man, he had a lot of good analogies. Um, but the thing, like what I remember, I think it was probably in the first or the second session. He just kind of had such a big aha moment. What he shared with me was I call it the ladder to success. I forgot what he called it back in the days, but it's like, okay, here's where you want to go. It's your next level of success. For some, that is winning an Olympic gold medal. For others, is making the Olympic team. For others, is making a regional team or just making a squad, right? It's just your next level of success. And you got a ladder that leads to that success. And the ladder has three parts. It has a left leg, the right leg, and the middle part. Right? I could like draw it out for you, but you can imagine like a ladder. And the left
Sure.
leg is your body. The right leg are your skills. And the middle part is your mind. And these are happen to be, as an athlete, the only things that you can train, right? You can train your body, endurance, strength, power, whatever. You can train your skills. In wrestling, that would be, your takedowns, your defense, whatever. In swimming, it's like high elbow and stuff like that. And then you have your mind, okay, that you can train. And what he said was your performance in competition is going to depend on the lowest of the three. So I'll give you an example, right? If somebody's mentally super tough and the body's in great shape, but they just changed up the technique entirely last week, they're not going to do well in competition because they haven't internalized the new technique. If they're mentally tough and they got a great technique, but they're sick or they got a broken leg, they're not going to be doing very well in competition. And in my case I was in great shape. My technique was dialed in, right? I'm not saying I had the world's best technique, but it was enough to get me to the next level of success. But my mind broke down in competition, right? So I was always limited by my competition mindset, so to say. And what he said is like, we got to get to a point where we got the body, the technique, and the mind at a high level at the same time. And that's when you get these performances where you surprise yourself in a positive way. It was things like these analogies, and I'm like, oh my God, this makes so much sense. And I had this light
Yeah.
bulb moment.
So that was a big piece of you becoming an Olympian. So you mentioned it's interesting to hear an Olympian say, my mind is what the thing that held me back. I really struggled with performance anxiety for years. And then you go on to become an Olympian. So for the listener, I want you to think about like, okay, maybe you feel like you've got more potential. You haven't unlocked your full capabilities yet. You haven't maximized your potential. Like there's hope for you. Like wherever you're at, there's hope for you. You just have to bring the right people into your life. And David, for you, that was Jim Bauman.
Yeah, 100%. Like the blind spots that we all have, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I have a coach too, right? I'm coaching and I got a
Me too.
coach because I'm not arrogant enough to say, well, I don't have any blind spots. And do you know a lot of people that coach or consult and they don't have a coach?
Yeah. It's weird. It's like, what do you mean you don't have a coach? I was talking to one a
Yeah.
couple of days ago, and it's like they're a coach and they don't have a coach. It's like I tell my clients, like minimum effective dose of coaching is like 30 minutes a month. Like you have to get somebody to help you step out of the fray, out of the mix, out of the chaos of life, get clarity before you re-engage, right? I call it a productive pause. And my listeners who have been listening for a long time know what this concept is, but the productive pause we define it as a short period of focused reflection around specific questions that leads to clarity of action and peace of mind. And that's what we all want. We want clarity of action, peace of mind. That's what my coach gives me. I get at least 4 hours of coaching. Actually, if you add up all my coaching I get every month, it's probably more like 5 or 6 hours of coaching.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so you have a coach now too, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I think I need it, and I
Yeah.
also think like it's okay to change the coach. It's okay to
Yep.
have different
Agreed.
coaches. It's not like,
Yep.
it's abundant mindset, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious, can you walk me through like if you say that 30 minutes, that sounds really like that you getting a lot done with your clients or
Yeah.
yourself. Like
Yeah.
how do you do it in like 30
Yeah.
minutes?
So you have to figure like we start our whole program is about what is the vision for your life, like where are you going, like what do you want your life to look like in an ideal perfect vision for your life.
Mhm.
What does that look like? And then we have a process of reverse engineering that down to goals. And when you and I were competing, you in swimming, me in wrestling, and the listener for whatever sport you did, like it was a single-minded focus on that, right? Well, now life is much bigger than that. You have a kid, I have 4 kids, and there's just, life is pulling us a million different directions. So we have to get clear on goals, and we set them in 4 areas: relationships, self, health, and wealth. And we have to get clear on those goals. And then every month, you have to have somebody pulling you out of the mix, out of the fray, out of the rat race, and saying, how are we doing in all of these areas? Let's score. We have a tool where you score the prior month. How did you do last month? And it's color coded. You get a percentage, everything. Just like in sports, you had a win-loss record or a scoreboard. Like we have to have that in our lives too. So 30 minutes, minimum 30 minutes where you're going, okay, here's how I did in that area, and here's the new micro goal. And you do that with all 4 areas. You might have 5, 6, 7, 8 goals, multiple goals in some of those areas. And so that's the minimum effective dose that I believe of a productive pause, of a step back, evaluate, after action review, what went right, what went wrong, what do I need to do next time?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, awesome. So it's like, yeah, it's refocusing, right? Refocusing.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I'm curious, what kind of things did you do with Jim Bauman? Any techniques or tactics or things that you like? What do you do? Like when you work with a guy like Jim Bauman, who has worked with obviously maybe the greatest athlete of all time ever, right? In anything, Michael Phelps. Like, what does a guy like that do with you during a given session, David?
Yeah. So the cool thing was I was literally, like you imagine it, I was just sitting on the couch, right? So I could go even when I was like dead beat from training and all that. I love that. And like one of the most powerful tools that he's taught me is just conscious breathing. And I think breathing, because it's so easy to do.
For the listener, like they wanted to hear some like revolutionary new technique that no one's ever heard about before, just this secret potion that Michael Phelps and David had that nobody else has, but it's the basics. Okay, so conscious breathing. Tell me more.
It's the conscious breathing. And the funny thing is, because I saw at the Olympics, man, we had to be at the call room like 30 minutes before because, there was like a strict TV schedule. They were checking if you're not wearing any like hidden advertising and stuff, right? So we had to be there early. And there were 3 call rooms, and I got to the first one. It was really hot, and obviously I was nervous and stuff. But I had the tools to handle it. But then 3 minutes later, like Michael Phelps with his headphones, right, and it was like he walks in and like all the big shots, and I was like looking up to, and I got more nervous. And Michael Phelps sat down, and I see him doing the same breathing thing, because I was using what I learned from Jim, and I saw him sitting down doing the exact same thing. I was like, all right, well, cool, right? And then moved to the next call room, did the breathing again because the nervousness like kept coming back. Did it again and last. So the breathing is like one of the things. Like for example, if somebody, what would be a use case for some of your listeners? Like before a job interview, an important one, or
job
speech?
Interview, sales presentation. Maybe just going into a busy, stressful day at work when they have tons of meetings, big meetings, important meetings. Yeah, that would be a good example.
It's just like when nervousness, like this is how I learn it, this is how I teach it to my athletes, is that when we get nervous, fearful, worried, right, that range of emotion, right, there's like the body's muscle tone changes and the mind gets obviously stressed out. And because what happens is when there's an actual, so I don't know if you guys can see it, but if there was an actual line showing up in my room, right, I wouldn't be breathing calmly. I would go breathing up in my chest. My throat would probably start to close in. My heart rate goes up, and I fight, flight, or freeze. Okay. People probably heard of that.
Right.
And so what he taught me was like to first breathe into my belly. Okay. And like really easy way to do that is you put your hands on your belly button, maybe slightly below it. You exhale completely until there's no more air in your lungs. And then you just breathe in your belly first before you fill your upper lungs. So you should see how your chest stays the same and your hands come out. It's like having a soccer ball in your stomach, right? And that signals the body and the mind, hey, it's safe. Okay. And then those reactions that we have, they'll dial, the brain will dial it down. Okay. So it's like 4 seconds in through the nose, hold it for 2, and then breathe out on 8. And you just like a balloon, you can actually like make like a little bit of a sound, and then 8 seconds out, hold it for 2, and do that 3 times when you have enough time. When you don't have enough time, like in front of the starting block, you just take 1 breath like that. And it just signals the body when you fill the lower part of the lungs, which is what we skip when we get nervous, you signal it, hey, we're cool.
Interestingly, about a half an hour after this interview, I am meeting virtually remotely with a breathing coach, and we're going to do my first breathing session. So I'm super excited. So interesting to hear you talk about this, and I'm going to do this here shortly.
I'm sure they'll have plenty of other tricks up their sleeves. You know, I mean, you could
Yeah.
combine it with like breathing in a color that stands for, say, you want more confidence, and say you get like confidence is red for you, right? You could breathe in red. Like there's things like I think
Yeah.
there's not one way to do it, but what we do know, and there's tons of research on that, is that conscious breathing has like you cannot mess up anything, right? It will benefit your sleep, benefit your immune system. It will benefit anything. Like you cannot mess up. And that's
Yeah.
really good. If something is risk free, so to say, right, and you
Sure.
can only have an upside to it, there's
Yeah.
really like no point not to try it out
Right.
and be playful with it and like reap the benefits of that. And it's so
Yeah.
easy.
There's not very many things in the world that you can do that have zero negative consequences.
Exactly.
Hmm.
Right. And those types are really interesting, I think, to like explore and just play around and see what works for
Yeah.
you. Because again, you could teach it to someone in 3 minutes.
Yeah. Did you do much visualization with Jim
Yeah.
Bauman?
Yeah, we did. So
Any tactics or specific ways that he would have you visualize?
like look, I actually think that I improved that process, and I'm sure there's other people that have it. I just never found it. But like my coach that
Yeah,
I
it's
have
very good.
right now, right, is that he takes me through a visualization all the time, guided visualization, and he starts by me walking through a forest, and he's asking me to build a full sensory perception of what that's like to walk through a beautiful forest. And you know, it's more about like being connected to nature, being creative, and all that. And I've tried this meditation laying down, standing, sitting in a yoga position. I tried everything and it was okay and it worked. But then one day I felt very playful. I kind of made a little bit of room in my office. And I started to actually, when he was saying you're walking through the forest, I actually walk. I wasn't walking forward because I'm walking to my computer, but I was moving my feet. And with my eyes closed, I would like look up because try that real quick. Close your eyes and look around in your room. What you'll notice when you look down to your feet, for example, or to your books back, does your mind fill in the blank even though you don't really see?
Sure.
Right. And so I started to look up and I saw like the branches and the leaves and the birds fly by. And then I was like touching a tree. I was using my physical movement. You know, I was
Yeah,
picking up some
interesting.
soil, smelling it. And like I got this really real experience of a visualization. And so I was like, okay, how can we use this for the athletes? And so I have them put on their cap and their goggles and you know, so and they have them smell the chlorine suit. So it's making it
Yeah.
as real as we can, and the kids love it, right? They absolutely just love it. And you know, when they touch the wall, it's like they do the movement. Some of them go get like gorillas, like yeah. Others just go like a smile and they lay back. Whatever the reaction is for them, right? I want them to have it so they because it's much easier to have the emotion when you do like the body, you know, the body posture with
Sure.
it, right? Right? Have you ever tried that to be
Yeah.
sad when you're going like this?
Oh, right. No, I haven't done that, but yeah, of course, I've done the body. I visualize. I still visualize now, and I get up and I walk around my office, and I'm pumping my fists, and I'm feeling the emotion, and I'm getting like I'm moving my body with it.
Okay, so you're also moving your body. See, okay, so people.
Yeah.
Okay, I wasn't taught that back in the days,
Yeah.
so
Neither
I
was
just
I
didn't.
back in the day.
So I think that's a really cool way. It just makes it more visceral
Yeah.
for us. I think. Hey, I have a question. How would you describe visualization to a like a 10-year old? What is it that we're doing?
I think I would start by having them visualize something that's like fun, playful, maybe more like going to an amusement park or going to a movie, you know, like visualize something like take like to like give them an example, give them an experience of visualization, and then say, okay, well, that's visualization. That's what we're talking about. You went to a movie, you walked in, you bought, you know, your parents bought the ticket, and you went and you got popcorn, then you walked into the movie theater and you found your seat, you sat down, it's dark, it's cool, and then the movie screen comes on, and you know you were laughing. Can you picture yourself laughing? And try to get them to experience that and go, oh, well, that's visualization. That's what it is. That was easy to do. Now let's do it for your sport.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, I read this quote recently from Roger Federer, and he shared that he's won 80% of his matches over the course of his career, but only 54% of the actual points. He's won
Yeah.
80% of his matches, but only 54% of his points. And so he said, on average, I lose every other point. So this is his quote. He said, you want to become a master at overcoming hard moments. The best in the world are not the best because they win every point. It's because they lose again and again and have learned to deal with it. And this is a guy, like I said, on average, he has lost every other point in his career. How do you help athletes or even business leaders move past a failure, move past a failure, a setback? Maybe they caused it, right? I screwed up at an interview, or maybe it's something totally external. How do you help them move past a failure or setback?
Man, Jim, I spoke to Roger about that in the Olympic Village. I remember the
Wow, really?
conversation. Yeah.
Yeah.
And here's the thing, right? That's why tennis players are mentally some of the like toughest athletes in the world, because exactly what you said, they're going through the, excuse my language, shit all the time, right? They double fault on the serve. The other guy scores a good point. They hit it in net, and they got 10 seconds to walk back to the line and refocus. What a gift, right? With us swimmers and wrestlers, right? We go in a match, we go in a swim meet, we race, we swim a bad time, and the next thing you know, the whole competition went bad. Because we don't have that many opportunities where we can learn to refocus after something didn't go according to plan. And so, like, to how to do it in the business, yeah, I mean, it's like what I read from you is like fail often. I mean, it's like giving, just going for it, and what a gift! What a gift to fail. I'm not saying like we wish for failure, but it's inevitable. It's gonna happen.
Yep. Sure.
And then fail and then refocus. And what a gift that ability to refocus.
And I think simply knowing that, hearing a Roger Federer say something like this, if you can continue to like embed stuff like this into your mind, into your world, into your life, if you're, listening to interviews like this and reading quotes from a Roger Federer, you go, oh, okay. Like he's dealt with bigger, scarier, harder failures than I have, that I just dealt with today because whatever I messed up an interview or a phone call or whatever. He's dealt with this before. Reset. Let's go.
Also, I think there's also really interesting like research that they did on, like the most successful, like Michael Jordan, right? He scored so many points because he took the most shots. Tom Brady had the most passing yards because he passed the ball most often. So, and that is a mindset thing, right? Where you say, okay, I'm going to be courageous. And one of my like values is courage, because confidence, I say it's like, is like cool. Confidence you get when you know you can do it. That's what everybody wants. But really what you need is like, you make a commitment, and then what you need is courage, because confidence and courage are kind of similar. It's just that confidence feels good and courage doesn't feel good. But it's the same thing. You do something like, you don't know how to do it. You do it anyway. You go for it. And knowing that it could go wrong.
Yeah.
It's life.
Yeah. Yeah, that's profound. I mean, and for the listener, what does that mean for you? What does that courage look like for you? Is it courage to step into the ring again, to step into the next sales call or the next conversation, the next tough, difficult conversation you have to have with a direct report of yours? It didn't go well last time, or you're not feeling it today. Do you have the courage to actually step into, to have the tough conversation, to schedule the meeting, to step into that office, to do the thing, to have the tough conversation with your kid or your spouse or whoever it might be? Do you have that courage to, you failed at trying to train for a 10K, and last time, and you got injured or you just quit. You quit on yourself. You have self-doubt about it. Do you have the courage? It's not always going to feel good. Do you have the courage to take that next step, to move into that, to step towards that? David, I want to go back and ask you about Roger Federer. What was that like? You met Roger Federer at the Olympic Village. What was the conversation like? And tell me, take us back to that moment.
We were like
standing dinner, and like you saw him like getting a candy bar out of the vending machine, or what?
I don't think there's a candy bar in the. I don't think there's a vending machine in the Olympic Village. They did have McDonald's though. I wonder if they still have it in. But like people like Ryan Lochte and like they. I think in Beijing he just ate McDonald's all the time, which is crazy, right? And he was so good. But different story. But Roger, yeah, man, he was visiting the Swiss team, because he was actually staying outside of the Olympic Village because they were playing in Wimbledon. It was I was in London, 2012. And so that was across the whole town or city. So he wasn't staying there, but he came to like visit because obviously, like Roger, I don't think there's a bigger superstar in Switzerland than Roger, and he was there to like hang out and take some pictures and stuff. And I just remember like this focus thing. Obviously, I was like a bit starstruck. It's just like really cool
Yeah.
to meet him. And you know what? But the cool thing is he's so kind, and he has such a good memory because I met him like a couple months later at the airport in like the lounge, and he's like, David, right? It's like, oh, that's cool.
No
Yeah,
kidding.
yeah,
Wow.
yeah, yeah. It's like really cool. But yeah, we talked about focus, about the ability to like refocus, and I mean, it just made so much sense when he talked about it, and you could just see like he's living proof of that, right? And when you look at how he behaved on the court and stuff when he was younger, you wouldn't think when you see him when he's older because he's well spoken, but like back in the days, it was like a storm.
Yeah, he was
And
angry. He was throwing his racket, everything. Yeah.
right, and seeing that development, it's
Yep.
just it's like it's very cool to see, and to be like in proximity to like an athlete like that. I think that gave me a lot of like motivation and just like a good feeling. It's very cool that he came. It's like it was. I think I'll speak for everybody. That was a great experience to have him there and like kind of talk about these things.
Yeah. Yeah. I believe it.
Mm.
There's a lot of listeners who, like you, like me, like you said a minute ago, like we're going places, we're driven, we're going places. We have this athletic mindset, and we're applying that to like our businesses and our lives and career driven. And we're listening to podcasts and reading books and pushing ourselves and setting goals and drive, drive, drive. Some people feel burned out, right, in their career. Is there a point at which the pursuit of optimization and peak performance can become unhealthy or destructive? Can it contribute to burnout? Or does that mean you're just doing it wrong?
I would imagine that this is very individual. Like I can share what I do because I got that like drive, and I want to be there already, right? There's so much to do in the business and
Yeah.
stuff. But what I do, I just focus on family time. And this is something that I had to learn, like actually what my coach did with me, because I was working, when you have your own business or if you're like a high level corporate executive and stuff, you can work 60, 70, 80 hours, like no problem. And I was doing that right before we had our daughter. And my coach was like, okay, that can't be like healthy. And, I assume he was right. You can do it for a couple of weeks, but then, not for a long run. And he said, okay, so next week, what I want you to do is I want you to work 30 hours max. So that means if you work 5 days a week, you got 6 hours a day. That's it. And I was like, okay, wow, he's crazy. How am I going to get all the work done? I mean, like I'm going to fall behind. Like what are my clients going to say? Right. It's not going to work out. But I stuck with it, showed some courage, and I did the full week. What I found was the sun was still there in the morning, right? The world was still spinning. It was all good. I found new ways, creative ways to do what I needed to do it quicker, outsource it to, involve other people who are actually more capable than I was to do these things. I found a lot of stuff that had nothing to do with the vision where I wanted to go. And I was
Mm-hmm.
very, very scared of it. And then I found out it was all like in my mind. And now I just, take time off, like complete, like I take a day off
Yeah.
and I don't look at my phone, and I just hang out with my daughter, with my wife, and play.
Yeah. And the best coaches know in athletics and sports that there has to be rest, right? There has to be rest periods, right? There's hard days, there's light days. Um, I was talking with an Olympic champion rower a few days ago, actually a fellow
Cool.
UVA grad, Lindsay Shoup. I've had her on the podcast as well,
Cool.
but she's very involved in rowing and training still, and she talks about light, medium, hard days, and I think it just really makes sense, right? There have to be light days, right? There have to be days built in where you're not just pushing with full effort, right? It just doesn't work, and you have to have practices, whether it's the gratitude practice, the breathing practice, things like that, where you're pulling back and you're resetting your body physically and mentally so that you're prepared to perform at your best. And you want to be able to push at a high level consistently. You want to keep bumping up with that sort of minimum threat, what the light day is, right? If you can bump that light day up to what most people might consider hard, but for you, it feels light because you've trained yourself, you're doing all the other, you're getting good sleep, you're eating right, you're working out, you're doing the mindset work, you're doing the gratitude stuff, you're doing the breathing. Then you can just get more out of your life, but you do, I think, have to know when to pull back. So David, for the listener who loves what they're hearing from you. They want to take action on something they learned here today. What's one thing that the listener can do, one action item, one thing they can do in the next 24 to 48 hours to start taking your advice and applying it to their lives?
Yeah. I I want to give the listener something about self-talk that I think is not a lot of business people use it. And there's negative self-talk, which obviously we don't want to engage in. And then there's positive self-talk, which is kind of like affirmations, or what do you understand under positive self-talk?
Yeah, positive affirmations, saying the
Right?
right things. I think, people talk about you have a good attitude. Well, where does that start? It starts with words. It starts with self-talk.
Yeah. And what I noticed, what I observed in myself and with all the clients that I've worked is that positive self-talk only works when you have the belief. So when you work a lot and you have the evidence, you work hard and you work a lot, you can do positive self-talk about that because this is true. But if you go in an interview and you're super nervous, for example, and you're telling yourself, "Oh, there's no need to be nervous. Like, don't overthink it. It's okay." Like, it's like literally, if I ask you to not think of a pink elephant, the only thing that can happen is you're thinking of a pink elephant. And so it actually, and I noticed that when I was 18, I had no confidence, and that came out, like, especially like with girls. The hotter the girls, the more awkward I became. And
Hmm.
like in the movies, sometimes when a guy approaches a girl and he gets shut down, and it's like so awkward, it makes you cringe.
Yeah.
That was me. And I read this book and I was like, okay, just get up in the morning, look in the mirror, and tell yourself 100 times that you're pretty. And to start doing that, I was like, okay, easy enough. I can do that. Every day I get up, you're pretty, you're pretty, you're pretty, you're pretty. But what happens is, if you're watching me from the outside, or my subconscious is just observing that, and the message that you get is bullshit. If you actually felt that way, you wouldn't be saying it. So it reinforced the idea that I'm not feeling pretty about myself. So I didn't have to believe that I'm pretty. I was just consciously saying it. And it actually made it worse.
Yeah.
And that's why I
Interesting.
think, right, a lot of people do positive self-talk, but they don't believe it, so it makes things worse. And so what I like to do, I think this is a great hack that one of my coaches gave me, is like, I just call it self-talk. And what we do is, like, okay, the brain starts to like dial up. Do we have like 2 or 3 minutes? I'll give you
Yeah.
an analogy with it. So, like,
Absolutely. Yeah.
like, for example, and again, the brain's job is survival, right? So we'll look out for dangerous situation where you could get hurt physically or emotionally. Like, a job interview is emotionally, we could get hurt. Okay. And if I had a guard dog at home, I don't, but let's say I have a guard dog whose name is Nico, right? What will Nico do when the doorbell rings?
Yeah. Bark like crazy and attack. Get ready to attack.
Right, we'll go to the door and start barking. And the brain is doing the same thing. It will notice, okay, there's a potentially dangerous situation coming up. Like, it could be rejected in the interview, right? Could mess up. And it will start to bark, and with thoughts and feelings like, oh, am I good enough? Is it going to work out? What are the other candidates? Whatever. Okay. And so it's just doing its job. The dog's job is to make me aware there's somebody at the door. The brain's job is to make me aware there's a potentially dangerous situation ahead where I can get rejected and hurt. So, what will Nico do if the doorbell keeps ringing and I ignore him?
He's going to keep barking. He's going to
Keep
keep getting
barking and
fired up, more and more fired
yeah,
up.
maybe go up to the door and go, right?
Yeah.
With
Yeah.
his
Okay.
paws,
Yeah.
right?
Sure.
And so the brain will do the same thing. It will start to, like these old volume knobs on the radio. It'll start to, if you ignore it, it'll start to crank up its volume, and the thoughts and the feelings will get
Oh,
heavier,
yeah. Of
right?
course.
Until we get like a real serious reaction. And
Mhm.
so the thing that I can do with Nico is, if I just go out without even opening the door and I just let Nico know, hey, Nico, I hear you. It's okay. It's just a neighbor, right? The dog will calm down. And in that moment, he will go back to playing, eating food, whatever he was doing before. Okay?
Yeah.
And the brain is the exact same thing. It just wants to be heard and acknowledged because it's just
Yeah.
doing its job, right? So what I do is, and that's what I call self-talk, is like, okay, I'll give you like a personal example. Happened to me last week. Because a lot of kids and the teenagers, the athletes that I coach, they have their end of summer competition right now. Okay. And look, my life, I'm very happy with my life. I got a daughter, beautiful wife. I'm got enough money. I'm healthy. Everybody around me is like healthy. I got the cool opportunity to, be on a cool podcast, coach people, love it. Can't sleep, go to bed, eyes open, and my mind or my brain decides to start to fire out all cylinders. Okay, David, what if none of these kids swim best times in the summer? What if your stuff doesn't work? You'll be found out you're a fraud. You're going to lose your entire business. You're not a good husband. You're a bad father. And what I
Wow.
did is like,
Yeah.
okay, I hear you. I see what you're doing. You're just doing your job, making me aware of that. Okay. Of the
Mhm.
worst case scenario. I see you. And I acknowledge that the worst case that you're giving me, that none of them is going to swim a best time, is a possibility. Because is it a possibility? It is, right? It's a possibility. And I say it's not what I want, but I acknowledge it's a possibility. What it is that I want, and I choose to give those kids and athletes everything that I have until the moment they're done with the competition and beyond, right? So I acknowledge the brain, I acknowledge the worst case scenario is a possibility, and then I take a stance and I say what it is that I want. So that's, and that is self-talk
Yeah, it's
grounded
so
in
good.
reality, right? And you know what the crazy thing is, what the brain will do? This is also important. Like the brain will omit information. Like the crazy thing is, most of the kids already had their end of summer competition, and almost all of them, like 94% of them, swam best times, crushed the best times. But my brain decided to omit that information and
Yeah,
just look at that
just
last
see
kid
the
that got
negative.
injured. And, right? That's what the brain
Yeah,
does.
yeah,
It's really
sure.
important to
Yeah.
understand that.
Again, it's in protection mode. That's what
Exactly.
it's trained to do, but it's not helpful.
Exactly.
And a lot of times it's not helpful unless it's redirected.
This is this kind of self talk that if we don't have the belief installed yet, that is a self-talk that will calm the brain down and get rid or minimize the reaction that we have, and then we're cool because the brain is hurt.
Yeah, such a good action item there. Such a great takeaway. And listeners, you got to do something with this now, right? You have to do something with this. This is learning, but you've got to apply it now, right? Do you have a coach? David and I both have coaches. Like, do you have a coach who's asking you the hard questions, helping you implement what you learn, helping you do your productive pause so you can, step back, identify what is the brain telling me doing its job, what's the reality here, and then letting you re-engage more effectively into the world, into your job. David, for the listener who wants to find you, follow you, etc., how do they do that?
I'm quite active on social media, so or I got davidkarasek.com on the website. And otherwise, if you type in David Karasek, usually, because we're connected and they're listening to you
Yeah,
already, so then hopefully I'll
they'll
come up.
find you.
Yeah.
Yeah. And for the listener, as always, we'll have all the links to his social media and his website in the action plan. Go to jimharshawjr.com/action. David, thanks so much for making time to come on the show.
Thank you as well, Jim. It was a pleasure. Good
All right,
host.
man. Go
Bye.
Who's. Wahoo wah.
Go Who's.